60 seconds before we start our work in earnest. I use these 60 seconds to welcome you back to the KYIV Jewish Forum. The first day proved to be successful. I think the second day or half a day will be no less successful and useful. And I remind that we have simultaneous translation. Most of the work will be in English or maybe in Hebrew. I'm being told that one of the presentations today will be in French, which is a welcome difference from what we had before. And on your headsets, channel 4 is for English, channel 5 is for Russian, and channel 6 is for Ukrainian if you need to receive simultaneous translation. And speaking about languages, and to remind you how different yet how united we are here, I would like to offer you a small exercise, not very physical in contrast to what we had yesterday, but just look at the person next to you and say hello to them in whatever language you want. You have 10 seconds to do this. Look behind you, look to the person left to you, to the right to you, and say hello. I don't hear. Yeah? Very good, very good. So, we have 50 minutes for the very important panel discussion with questions and answers, preventing anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism on the interparliamentary level. We have a distinguished panel, not only because those people who will be on the stage very soon are self-sufficient and self-made people in their own right, but because they are being entrusted by many, many other people to represent their interests. They all are parliamentarians. They all have a huge experience in representing the interests of their voters, which, as we know, is not a very easy task. And of course, many of them, or all of them, have been doing quite a lot in the topic which is in the headline of this panel, preventing anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism. So I invite to this stage Tamar Chugashvili. She is first vice speaker of the Georgian parliament and head of the delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Please, Ms. Chugashvili. Your applause. Meyer Dov Habib, he is member of the French National Assembly and vice president of the Committee on Foreign Affairs in France. Emanuele Zingeris, member of the Seimas and vice president of the group of the European People's Party at the Council of Europe, and of course Seimas is the Lithuanian parliament. Franz Harold Trent, congressman of the 115th Congress, USA, whose biography is so full of different accolades and achievements that it would probably take me several minutes to read it out, but I'm sure that you will have enough impression about what Mr. Trent has done, Congressman Trent has done and is doing from what he will say. And we have a unique moderator who is also a parliamentarian. He is deputy of the Seimas, but this is the Seimas of Latvia, not Lithuania. Boris Silevich, deputy chairman of the Committee on Human Rights and Public Affairs. And this, once again, for me at least, emphasizes that preventing anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism and fighting for the rights of the Jewry is also part of the fighting for human rights. And with this, I'm handing over the floor to Mr. Silevich.
So, dear friends, Indeed, we're discussing the subject which is quite peculiar and quite often difficult for me to understand and to embrace. And I would like to ask our distinguished panelists the first questions as follows. It seems that everybody today condemns anti-Semitism. Everybody recognizes that Holocaust is the biggest tragedy in the history of mankind. In the meantime, we see increasingly biased and hostile policies towards the state of Israel and towards the Middle East problematic in general. Many prominent leaders, including in Europe, Angela Merkel and first Vice Chair of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans, explicitly said that anti-Zionism and anti-Israelism is a modern form of anti-Semitism. Nevertheless, in the meantime, we see that this understanding and these statements are not reflected in practical politics. I'm not talking only about the UN. The UN is a very specific organization, is a big round table, and it is not a secret that majority of the UN member states are not democracies. Unfortunately, the same trends can be observed also in other organizations where there can be no doubts that these are made and formed by genuine democracies like the OSCE, Council of Europe, or the European Union. And my first question to our panelists is, you as experienced parliamentarians, as decision makers, how can you explain this discrepancy and this, I would say, a sort of political schizophrenia with regard to attitudes towards classic anti-Semitism and modern anti-Israelism? Please, Tamar, would you like to start?
Thank you very much, Boris. It is a pleasure and honor to be present in this conference. I would start by congratulating Ukrainian colleagues for organizing this very important event. Well, to start with, I represent Georgia. So for me, it's talking about anti-Israelism or anti-Semitism. It's in some sense difficult because Georgia is probably one of those countries, and Georgians are among those nations where the last thing that you can find is anti-Semitism. We have a history of 26 centuries, actually, of peaceful coexistence of Georgians and Jews. The first evidences of this very friendly coexistence have been found in 6th century. Actually, the first evidences are coming from the 6th century before Christ. So in our nation, it is something which is very difficult to find. But on an international level, in different areas, in different parts of the world, well, obviously the anti-Semitism is something that needs and deserves proper attention. And I think that parliamentarians, politicians have a very significant role that we can play, both on a national level and on interparliamentary levels. Well, first of all, Boris, you asked the question, it's a topic that we have debated, also discussed during these 2 days. What is exactly the anti-Semitism, how that can be defined? And these definitions, in my opinion, should be made by parliaments, and how politicians communicate with their constituency, how politicians speak about what is the message that they spend on this topic is very, very important, because we all understand that awareness raising, education is the key for preventing anti-Semitism on a local level, on a national level, as well as on international level. And politicians, as people who are talking heads, who communicate, who have all tools and means for communication with their constituencies, have a significant role to play. Obviously, the parliaments have also very good tools, which is legislation actually, for preventing any forms of discrimination, any means for discrimination. For example, In our case, the anti-discrimination legislation is quite strong, is quite good. I don't think that there have been cases of identified cases of discrimination on anti-Semitic grounds, but the legislation is in place. And no matter whether there is a state agency, whether there is a private agency, or the individual who might discriminate person, they will be facing, this person or this entity will be facing the charges according to the law. As well as parliamentarians and parliaments have an obligation and have opportunities also to provide, to create the legislation which are targeting the hate crimes. And these pieces of legislation, the effective implementation of these laws can serve as good tools and good mechanisms for preventing any expressions or any expressions actually of anti-Israelism or anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism. As for the interparliamentary levels, I think that especially on the Council of Europe, because I feel more comfortable speaking about the Council of Europe rather than other international parliamentary and interparliamentary formats. I think that Council of Europe has very effective and very good tools to monitor the countries, to make countries follow the different obligations. And these monitoring mechanisms, I think that in case the Council of Europe desires, this anti-Semitism is something that should deserve the attention from all member states, then Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly has the tools actually to make states pay attention to this problem and implement some of the reforms, or just promote some of the programs, some of the educational exercises which will help us to explain to citizens, to people all around Europe, why this is a problem, explain better than we do at this stage, and put additional effort into preventing emerging of increased issue that we are facing at this stage. So I think that the international mechanisms are there. I think that all of us can contribute to becoming this topic better debated and better discussed than it is right now, because I think that sometimes the problem is overlooked, and all of us can play, all the parliamentarians in this international parliamentary platforms have opportunities and also an obligation to make these debates even more active, and therefore use the tools that interparliamentary platforms have for facing this problem. So this is very briefly from my side, and I would be happy to answer your additional questions, Boris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tamar. Mr. Habib, would you like to make your contribution?
Hello, everybody. If you don't mind, my English is not perfect, so maybe I'm going to do it in French, but if people have translation, if not, I can try to do it in English, but it's not perfect with my terrific accent.
It's up to you. You are in a democratic country, so you have choice.
I will do it en français. Je suis très heureux aujourd'hui d'être...
I'm very pleased to be here in Kiev. I congratulate the organizers for this wonderful session. Naturally, Ukraine has painful things in the past in terms of anti-Semitism. We're talking about that of huge number of Jews. At the same time, Ukraine has seen the birth of Jabotinsky, great writer, Shalom Aleichem. So I'm very pleased to be here. I'm here for the first time. I welcome everybody. Let's start from our topic. In 2018, in my country, anti-Semitism has been existing. One person was stopped, not because he was a Jew. Over several years, we've had 12 people who died starting from Toulouse, and 3 Jewish kids together with their father were killed because they were Jews. Today, France is facing a rise of anti-Semitism by 70%, whereas Jews account for less than 1% of French population, and anti-Semitic acts account for 50% of overall racist acts. So it's something that worries me a lot. I am worried a lot only about Jews. I'm worried about France, about my country, because this nation today, the new face of France is hatred towards Israel and anti-Zionism. Naturally, there is traditional right-wing anti-Semitism, something like was in Pittsburgh and Miami, but less in Europe, and in particular in France. Yet now, in Eastern Europe, it's about hatred towards Israel. It's mainly political act. They speak no more about anti-Semitism. I repeat, I'm not worried about Jews. I'm worried about France. There's something I say at the National Assembly. Represent French living abroad, 350 people, Malta, Cyprus, Turkey, and Israel. I am a Jew, member of National Assembly. 7 cardinals in Vatican also voted myself. At the same time, I'm saying that I'm very concerned with the situation in France. There were cases, you must remember, there were attempts at the stadium in France and in Normandy. There have been attempts on the clergy with shouting Allah Akbar. It's not about anti-Semitism, but later on it will be reduced to anti-Semitism. I'm so much concerned about Jews, because today there's evidence that Jews exist. I'm speaking about the state of Israel. Israel exists due to shore, but this is a lie. Every day people pray of returning to Zion. 3 years ago, a friend of mine, Prime Minister Netanyahu, been for 30 years together. We grew up together as kids, and a couple of days ago, my Israeli colleagues have gone, but tomorrow there will be Red Tape Day, restaurants were closed, and Netanyahu was taken together with me. We watched the movie. There was an American pilot. He was 90, and he told his story. He said that he had 10 occasions to drop bombs on Svensson during the war, and he said that 10,000 Jews died of death in Auschwitz. And he was an American pilot, and he told how he couldn't drop bombs on rails leading to the Auschwitz because he hadn't had the consent, and he said it wouldn't happen today. Today, the Tzahal have liberated the Air France aircraft captured by and there were hostages. It had Jews, non-Jews. It was an Air France aircraft. And today, the evidence of the security of Jews is the State of Israel, the French National Assembly. I'm very often called Mr. Israel at the National Assembly because I'm Jew. I love Israel. I love friends like I love my mom and dad, because you can't prefer your mom or your dad. I love both France and Israel, and the only guarantee now for the people of Israel is the existence of the State of Israel. That's why they are trying to diabolize Israel, to falsify history, and Europe can't recognize Jerusalem as the Israeli capital, and that's why every and each of us as Jews from various countries, for us it's very important to make sure that we highlight the truth. Unfortunately, I won't go on any further. I'll pass the microphone to the other. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Большое спасибо за то, что
coming from here, from Chernovtsi, from Kiev, I feel absolutely at home, being from Vilnius, from the former Jerusalem of the North. Well, pre-war time, the biggest minority in Lithuania were Jewish. I'm from Kaunas, former capital, and can you imagine 7 daily newspapers in Yiddish with chapters from Yiddish newspapers in Beijing, in New York, this European Yiddish-speaking society with Thomas Mann, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Franz Kafka in Yiddish. This classical European society destroyed. And when we started our war for independence against Soviet communist rule in Lithuania, we started from the moment of recognizing the Jewish presence in Lithuania and Lithuanian collaboration with Nazis. Self-critical point for every country in the European Union and applicant, associated member Ukraine, is of extremely importance. Why it's so important to say about collaboration with Nazis and Jewish heritage, and then to go to the chapter of Israel. Well, those 3 chapters, heritage, Jewish heritage, how we were murdered. In Lithuania, 94% of Jewish people were murdered. Can you imagine? It's one of the highest percentage in Europe. And my mother spent 4 years in Kovna ghetto and Nazi concentration camp Stuttgart, and she's still smiling. She's 97-year-old, and she has just told me on telephone, give best regards to Ukrainian Jews. We remember their Yiddish big world. So from our point of view, concentrating on Boris Selevich title, who just announced by Boris, this should clearly have the components done by West European countries like France and Germany after denazification, after the talks about Vichy regime, when Monsieur Mitterrand finally recognized in the 90s, Germans started denazification, the German under American pressure, but the authentic denazification came, I think, Boris, together with only from 68, from 70s, when we just have the internal discussion in Germany. And now Germany, like a key element in the European Union, stopped actually their educational move to the east. I would like here to invite our German friends who were so active after Second World War, clearing German society, now under leadership of European Union, should be responsibility of Germany should continue to be for new members of European Union and associated members too. Madam Merkel should be telling not only for German society, but for the Poles, Czechs, Hungarians, Lithuanians, Latvians about their duties. And we are, based on our dialogue with Berlin friends, we need European Union leadership not only against populism inside of European Union, but making homeworks about the Holocaust to continuation of homeworks. From my point of view, for example, American Jewish contribution for independence of the Baltic states was crucial. For our NATO membership was crucial. Andy Baker, Davis Harris, American Jewish Committee, Stuart Eisenstadt, clear support for in 89, in the 90s, 91. It was so crucial that now we can remember, after 30 years of independence, the Jewish people were supporting independence and our war for liberalization and freedom fighting in the 90s. So being from the 90s, from our democratic revolution, now supporting Ukraine on the path of their westernization, we like to have moral leadership. Boris, what we have now, the program America First, Lithuania First, Germany First, even Ukraine First, is bad. We should have our solidarity first, our democratic solidarity first, our Jewish solidarity first. And Jewish solidarity first means for us that the attacks against Israel should be accepted not like only terror attacks, but against attacks against humanity. Well, Israel is the place who defends democracy, and those 700 rockets during the last days against Israel means not terror attack, but attack against statehood of Jewish people and democracy of Jewish people. So we should make other qualification of those continuing terror attacks, and I would like to describe a very small example in 2 words what happened in usual meeting. Just Boris mentioned about United Nations, that is bad platform to talk. The organizations like Parliamentary Assembly, Council of Europe, like NATO Parliamentary Assembly, OSCE, much better, like, for example, IPU. Well, Mr. Habib tried to just tell to us about situation in France. I will describe you the meeting among 200 countries, members of IPU, inside of IPU. After Swedish member of parliament announced a resolution about women's rights against harassment of women, and was supported by United States, Canada, Australia, Israel, first of all, and Ukraine, of course, Georgia. The declaration about women's rights against harassments, actually harassments in parliament, that was a very anecdotic resolution. Well, anecdotic, well, it for us was self-understandable. It was condemned by 185 countries, mostly Muslim countries. Can you imagine? About such simple thing like, not about Israel, not defending Israel, about women's rights in the APU organization, International Parliamentary Union. A few months ago, simple 101st resolution about women's rights was put down by the other kind of civilization, other kind of culture against, that means our friends from Africa, they were voted against, and we were only Western countries voting in favor of human rights. I'm not talking about resolutions about Israel. It's blocked item and supported only by most European Union, American and Australian, New Zealand, Western, and from time to time Japan. So even India is not on our side in most of voting. So from my point of view, talking about Israel, we should openly changed our slogan, our parliamentary slogan, and talk about the attacks against humanity, not only terror attacks, but attacks against democracy. That is, well, we are based on the platform of democracy, and we would like to have Ukraine in the family of Western democratic countries, and your last election proved that you are a Western democratic country. Thank you.
Thank you, Emanuelis, for this very important contribution. Indeed, it's paradoxical that Israel is widely recognized that Israel is the only genuine democracy in the region, and exactly the only democratic state is most actively attacked by other states which consider themselves democracies. So you're absolutely right that this dimension should be stressed. Congressman Trent, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. It's a sweet honor for me to be here with all of you. I've had a wonderful time here in Ukraine, and I want to thank Majed El-Shafi and Joe Steinberg for helping me find my way around Ukraine. I would be wandering the streets of Kiev in a daze without them, so I'm very grateful for their help and for their presence here. I think it's especially appropriate that this conference is held here in Kiev in Ukraine because of the clear reputation and the way that the Ukraine across the years has been the home of so many of the Jewish people, and for the way that you have rejected anti-Semitism and have been an example to the world. You know, I had a kind of a special feeling toward Ukraine for a long time, but I suppose when the time came when the Budapest Agreement should have been honored by America and Russia, it was Russia that broke it so significantly, and America really wasn't there for you, and I've always been sorry about that. I want to be very open about that. I think that the Ukrainian people are noble people and hold a special place of heroic significance in my own heart. When we talk about the challenge of dealing with anti-Semitism, I think, you know, that it's very, very important that we realize that we have to defeat this on an ideological level. We have to somehow make anti-Semitism not only something that is rejected by society, but one that is unthinkable in the human heart. And I'm convinced that one of the surest ways to do that is to simply tell the story of Israel, of the people of Israel, and help the world understand who these children of Abraham really are. I know it's impossible for anyone to articulate the impact that Israel has had on human society and the world geopolitics and just almost everything that we do. I suppose it would be impossible for me as a Christian to point out how Israel has meant so much to the Christian world. I mean, so much of the bases of so much of our history, Israel has been responsible for. And if you consider just the impact that this little nation has had on all of human society, it's profound. I mean, America certainly has to thank Israel in that Israel was some of the Jewish members of the society at the time that the revolution occurred probably made the difference between America becoming a free nation or not becoming a nation. And in terms of sustaining America as a nation, it's important to keep in mind that, you know, a little short guy named Albert Einstein, some of you may have read about him, he came to America because he knew it was a safe place for a Jewish person to come. And he was able to articulate the capability of nuclear fission that could be weaponized in a way that the world had never seen before. And he gave that weapon to America before Otto Hahn of Germany could have given it to Adolf Hitler. And what a dark world it might have been apart from that reality. So I would suggest to you that Israel has made profound contribution to humanity. If one considers the technology and the medical advances that they've brought, they are the smartest people in the world. And it's important that the world understands that. They understand that it's not just what we do for Israel, it's what Israel has done for America, for Ukraine, for the world. And yet, in spite of that, Israel has been a nation that throughout history has been abandoned and betrayed and tortured and desecrated. It's a heartbreaker if you really consider how the history of these people has shown that they have maintained their courage in every situation. I suppose if any people on earth ever had the right to just simply capitulate to suffering, it would have been the Jewish people during the Holocaust. If you consider the weight of unendurable heartbreak and torture and oppression that they dealt with, who could have blamed Israel if they'd simply given up in those moments? And yet, instead of doing that, in their hour of darkest adversity, when this horror was finally over, when this nightmare finally ended, they didn't give up. They chose to dry their eyes and to stand up and to look up again and begin to build again. And they built a family, and they built a community, and they built a nation. And today Israel is the linchpin of peace and security for the entire human family. It is profound if one really considers it that way. And I think sometimes that the best way to fend off a lie, to reject fallacy, is to simply tell the truth. You know, Augustine once said, "The truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose and it will defend itself." And I'm so deeply convinced that one of the ways that we failed Israel is by simply not helping the world understand who these people are, what a gift of God the nation of Israel has been to the entire world. And at that moment, it occurs to me that anti-Semitism will not only become rejected by society, but it will become unthinkable in the human heart. And it's important that all of us stand in a unified position to defend Israel, because, you know, unity doesn't come from just getting together like this and saying, well, we're all going to be unified. You can't sustain unity without certain foundational principles. And I am convinced that the thing that will sustain us in protecting Israel and protecting the world against the ravages and evil of anti-Semitism is to simply tell the truth about who these people are and to reject the insidious attacks against them that have happened throughout the world. You know, if you really consider the forces of good and evil in the world, one shouldn't probably be surprised that the people that have added so much to this human race are the ones that are under attack so often. And I believe that it's important that we stand there and do what we can while we can. Yeats said that the center cannot hold in this world, because the best lack all conviction and the worst are full of a passionate intensity. And it is important that the people who care are as impassioned as those who would somehow maliciously and malevolently tear down this noble people called Israel. And with that, sir, I'm going to return the balance of my time.
Thank you very much, Frank. I can't agree more that this is not a matter of policies, but just a matter of basic values when we're speaking about anti-Semitism. So, friends, we have exactly 15 minutes for questions and answers. I assume that we have microphone in the room, yeah. So Andrei was the first, I guess. Yeah.
My question is to the moderator. You come from the country which in our imagination is closely associated with Lithuania. How different and how similar the situation is in your country? We heard from Mr. Zingeris. Now let's hear a bit from you.
You're absolutely right. The problems are quite similar in Lithuania and Latvia. The trends are the same. And of course, for Lithuania and Latvia, some particularly painful issues are related to anti-Semitism. It's namely Holocaust and events in Lithuania and Latvia during the World War II. So we know that Vilnius was called Eastern Jerusalem because of very big and powerful and influential Jewish community which was completely destroyed. The same was in Latvia, and of course, Nazis actually occupied the Baltic states very soon. And this is why in my family over 70 people were killed and 2 survived. And this is a typical statistics for the Baltic Jewry. And each of us can tell such stories. And of course, and it's not a secret that many local people, not only Latvians and Lithuanians, but also minorities, also Russians and Poles and so on, were involved in Holocaust, it's not a secret. And sometimes it's really very painful to admit. And again, some false accusations actually moved against Jews, allegedly about very active participation of Jews in occupation of the Baltic states in 1940. It's quite obvious the Jewish people did not have choice. While for Latvians and Lithuanians it was a very tough decision. It was like a civil war. And quite often it was when one brother was fighting in the Latvian SS Legion and another brother was fighting in Soviet army in this Latvian rifleman division. But for Jews, there was no choice at all. And of course, this is simply a lie. It was not the case that exactly Jews perpetrated deportations and mass executions of Latvian people in 1940. It's proved by historians, but still this myth and negative stereotypes still widespread as always, anti-Jewish stereotypes. So this is really a painful issue to accept the past. And with this regard, I would say that policies, official policies of political class, of the governments and presidents, I fully endorse. I always say my party is in opposition, but probably relations with Israel and the attitudes towards anti-Semitism is the only issue where I fully agree with our foreign ministry. This is what I always say to our foreign minister. But unfortunately, in the society at large, as well as among political parties, there are some very hostile attitudes. Xenophobic populist parties are on the rise in the entire Europe. And in the Baltic states, these attitudes toward Holocaust and issues related to anti-Semitism are particularly manifested during this process. This is a very complicated story, so I stop here. So I guess Mr. Nyman was the next, and then Mr. Giletsky.
Большое спасибо за ваше выступление.
Thank you very much for your talks. If you don't mind, I want to ask about Kyiv, Ukraine. Very short question. Here in Kyiv, there was a Kotovsky Library, which was later renamed into Olena Pchilka Library. Olena Pchilka was mother of a great Ukrainian poet, Lesa Ukraina, but you don't choose your parents. She was a prominent anti-Semitic. Do you think it's manifestation of anti-Semitism or not?
Hear the translation. The question is that big library was renamed after the name of a person who is known by because of anti-Semitic views. So is it acceptable or not in your view? Please.
I'm sorry. Извините,
I'm sorry, I'm not an expert in Ukrainian situation or local political ethics, but I must say, speaking about the Second World War, I think we should avoid naming streets with persons having to do with either murder or cooperation or collaboration with German authorities. It's a homework in civilization, and I think Ukraine also realized that this has to do with applying to the European Union. We fight this as we can. This could be called a glorification of Nazi times. We are having debates. There's one debate on a general who signed the act of Shaolai Jews deportation into ghetto, although he didn't sign the act on murder, and there is a sign, there is a plate, sometimes they broke it, sometimes they don't, and we try to express our opinion on who is considered heroes. So the question is, who are heroes from the past? And I want to add to what Boris Levy said, that in the Baltic states there is absolute consensus in relation to Israel. Everybody gives as the example of Israel as a small state. The smaller state should look up to, technical level, technological level, solidarity, etc., etc. But in terms of the past, we still have big questions. I think this development in your country has just started, and the questions is
The topic of this panel is preventing anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism. My question is this the same? We in the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe can witness that there is probably no anti-Semitism, but on the other hand, I think Mr. Zelevich and Ms. Jushvili and Emanuelis, we know that each time we have a resolution about Israel and Palestine, almost all of them are one-sided. And the last one, moving the embassy, U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, I think just me and Mr. Zelevich were speaking in favor of this. The others were on the other side. So, by the way, Congressman, greetings to your president for this decision. But again, my question, is this the same or not? Because if it is the same, then we need to unmask and say that anti-Israelism is a form of anti-Semitism. So I'd like to hear your answers. I mean, anybody who would like to answer this question, please.
So, colleagues, yeah, Habib, please.
Yes, I will try to answer in English and not in French. Maybe it's more. Everybody has the right to criticize the government of the state of Israel, as we can criticize any government. The problem today is to hide the anti-Semitism, which is not politically correct, by anti-Zionism. That is the point. You know, see what happened in the last day in Gaza Strip. You don't think that Israel can destroy in one day and to shave Gaza Strip in few hours? And they try to do chirurgical act to try to kill one by one terrorists. Sometimes you have, for sure, some civil wounded, but the problem in Europe is today, I mentioned you, when they kill in Toulouse, when they kill in Hypercacher, they remind Palestine problem, and they kill Jew, and after they kill French. And mostly today, the new anti-Semitism I mentioned you come from, see what happened in France, for example, today, with Gilets jaunes. Don't know how,
yellow jackets.
Yellow, how do you call it? Gillette. Yeah. What they say, they began from normal thing. Today, it's Jew, Rothschild. Macron has worked in the Rothschild Bank. The press belongs to the Jew. Israel, you know, every way is mixed. So your question is good. It's much more easy today. Boycott. What is boycott? What you find one place in the world, you have around the world 200 conflict territory, 200. But one is pointed all the time in the Palestine and Israel conflict. Why? You know, I am member of Parliament of Turkey. You know that in the north of Cyprus, you have a conflict. You know, in Ukraine, Russia, you have some conflict. We have 200 conflicts in the world. The only one which is focused is on these so small countries, but not, they don't mind. That is the point. That is the reason of all the problems all over the world. So, in my opinion, you can criticize Israel, but the new anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism.
Just thank you. I fully agree. I guess this was the point. Congressman Trent, please.
Yeah, first of all, I agree with my colleague. You know, there are ways to criticize Israel and some of their policies without being anti-Semitic. But so oftentimes, it's been my observation over the years that some of the institutions that ostensibly are even-handed, when it comes to Israel, they are not. The United Nations, I think Israel oftentimes calls them United Nothing, which is, in my judgment, rather charitable at times, because of the way that they condemn Israel time and time again, completely disproportionate to anything else that more the real discrimination and tragedies that occur across the world they seem blind to oftentimes. And Israel always seems to be judged by a double standard. And I see that as a basic anti-Semitism in itself. If the criticism is for the policies, that's one thing. But if there is a clear double standard that seems to be directed at the Jewish people, Israel is a Jewish state. You cannot separate that fact. So I just think it's very important that we're very, very, very vigilant. And I know there's a lot of momentum that is hard to overcome, and it's difficult. So I might just, probably will be my final thought to the conference, just suggest to you that as difficult as it is, we have to be unified and committed. I saw a movie here recently that depicted in 1588 an event where Queen Elizabeth rode down to her army, who was facing this massive armada from King Philip and from Spain, and it looked hopeless. It looked like there was no way they could possibly win. And she gave a speech that day that changed the history of the world. She said, "My loving people, you know, we see the sails of the enemy now approaching. We hear the guns across the water. Soon now we will meet them face to face. I am come here to live or die this day amongst you all. While we stand together, no enemy shall pass, no invader shall pass. Let them come with the armies of hell, they will not pass. And when this day of battle is ended, we meet again, in heaven or on the field of victory." And I hope that all of us in this room, including Georgi Levinsky over there, good man, I hope all of us in this room will come together as often as we need to, year by year, and be committed to stamping out this evil of anti-Semitism in the world. And if we do that, if we continue to meet, we'll either meet in heaven or on the field of victory. God bless you all. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe that these are very right words to conclude this session. Our time is over. And I would like in the end to express once again my gratitude to the organizers. Indeed, we need unity, we need coordination, we need synergy, and it was a great opportunity to meet old friends and to meet you people, like-minded people. Only together we can win this scourge of anti-Semitism and anti-Israelism. I thank you to all the panelists, and keep working. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silevich. And we had from distinguished panel. And the next topic is no less important, and there are no less distinguished speakers. The title of the panel is "The Role of the Jewish Community in Promoting Global Peace and Security." We will hear from Ernest Herzog. He is the head of the World Jewish Congress Global Jewish Community Security Department, and from Ofer Revich, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Security and Crisis Center, European Jewish Congress. And the moderator is a person of many distinguished features. It's Kim Sengupta, Defense and Diplomatic Editor from The Independent. Mr. Sengupta, the floor is yours. Hi. So 45 minutes.
Well, I've spoken to Fia So what I'll do is I'll just do a short introduction. The topic, one question they want me to ask them, and then they will, and then if we leave another 10-15 minutes for questions, would that be okay with you? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting us to the World Jewish Congress. I found the sessions yesterday and this morning absolutely fascinating myself. You are meeting at a highly important time with all that's going on regarding anti-Semitism and indeed violence against minorities in many countries in the world. I'm a journalist with the Independent newspaper in London, and I cover defense and security. I've got two distinguished and highly respected security experts here. Ernest Herzog, who is the head of the WJC Global Jewish Community Security Department, and Ophir Revak, who is the CEO of security at the European Jewish Congress. The topic, as you'll see, is quite broad-ranging on what part the Jewish community can play in global peace and security. Quite a challenge, but they will be addressing it. Can I just start off with one set of figures, which is a recent study by the Cantor Center in Tel Aviv University, which concludes that anti-Semitic violence in 2018 was more serious, more virulent than any other decade in recent history. Their figures show that there were 100 cases of anti-Semitic violence in the US, 68 in the UK, 35 each in France and Germany. We have also seen, of course, marches by populist groups, far right and far left, in Europe and, of course, in the US, if we recall what happened in Charleston. But, of course, it's not just the Jewish community, which is the minority, which has been under attack. We had the Easter bombings of the churches in Sri Lanka, and before that, the massacre in the mosque in Christchurch in New Zealand. 51 killed in Christchurch, 253 killed in New Zealand. We have talked about the virulent propaganda and incitement to violence by extremist groups. I just want to very briefly touch on what part mainstream politicians may be playing in whipping up tension and aggression. We have heard in the UK, the opposition party, Labour, racked with charges of anti-Semitism, with the leader being described as an anti-Semite. This morning, again sticking to the UK, there was a story about Nigel Farage, who you may know about, the anti-European Union campaigner, who's leading the Brexit party in the European elections, which, with opinion polls, are going to do very well. Now, Mr. Farage, it appears, has been regularly appearing in the radio talk show hosted by Alex Jones, the far-right host and conspiracy theorist. Alex Jones, if you recall, had described Sandy Hook as a government conspiracy, the London bombings as a government conspiracy, had claimed Mossad and CIA involvement in 9/11. Mr. Farage, in his various appearances, talked about conspiracy between big business and bankers. We talked about the supposed secret agenda of the Bilderberg Group and how the European Union is being manipulated to go to conflict with Russia. And we know the theme there is of it. So I just wondered if the panelists and you yourselves would like to consider what effect words have, especially coming from mainstream politicians. But I'm going to start with my two panelists, and in particular, the problematic ways in providing security in different countries. Ophir in particular has been looking at, for example, the problems of facing in providing security in the US compared to Europe. And he would like to address that in his opening remarks, and it's something I would like Ernest to also touch on in his remarks as well. But it's a broad topic, as you can see, and I've got two people here who are far more qualified than I to talk about them. So, Afia, you first.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank the Confederation President Boris Lushkin for this beautiful conference and this amazing organization. And also our dear Ina, I'm sorry that both of them are not here, but also to thank our dear Ina for this conference. I think in the last 2 days, 3 days, we heard a lot about Israel and the anti-Semitism. Our mission, me and my colleague, is to the security. My mission is to see how we can support and how we can protect, give a better security to the Jewish people in Europe and in all over the world. So I try to focus in this session about this subject. After 2 years of the diaspora of the Galut, in 1948, I would say the two things very important happened. The first thing is the independence of the State of Israel, and the second thing, that it's for the first time, I think, in the history, that the Jewish community start to protect themselves. So we saw it, the first reaction was in North Africa, I would say in Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria. Then they start to protect themselves against anti-Semitic or anti-community violence. And after we saw it in the rest of the European country, I would say the Western European country. And then slowly, we saw it also in South America, in another continent. And I think this is very important because for the first time, the Jewish people, the community said, we cannot only count on the authority, we cannot only count on the policemen. We are very happy to work with them, but we must protect ourselves. And the Jewish community, I would say, in all those parts of the world that I mentioned before, maybe except North America, Canada, Russia, they managed to protect themselves in one way that we understood with the time, and they managed to prevent, I would say, during these last 70 years, many attacks, but it's not 100%. Security, it's not 100%. I would say that in the last 4 decades, in the last 40 years, the statistics show that there's around in the world around 12,000 attacks each year. When I'm saying 12,000 attacks in the world, it's a terror attack. The average is 300 attacks every day. Every day, people are dying from terror attack. I would say more than 300 attacks every day. So what? In Europe, the statistic in the last 40 years is around 3-4 attacks in the last 40 years. So why suddenly, when we are meeting the European organization, or when you have a meeting with the government in each European country, the thing that something changed in 2015. The statistic is the same statistic, nothing changed. For us, terror is a terror. If it's a terror against a Jew, or a terror against a Christian, or against Muslim, terror is a terror. It's happening in Europe, it's happening in America, it's happening in Israel. Terror is terror. So what changed in 2015? Then I would say that most of the European organizations and most of the government say it's changed. And for us, nothing changed. For us, it's exactly the same thing during the last 70 years. So I would say that what it changed, that it's the first time, again the first time, all of us, the Jewish, the Christian, and the moderate Muslim, were facing the same threat. If we saw in the last 5 years, since 2015, most of the attacks were not against Jews. Were against the public, against the Muslim, against the Jewish, against everybody. The enemy can come, they took a car, they took a knife, and they went to attack. No any specific target, no specific people, not specific building. And it's the first time also that the enemy is not coming from abroad. It's not coming from Iran, from the Middle East, from other country. It's the first time that our enemy, it's our citizen. Can be your friend, can be your neighbor, can be your family, can be everyone in your neighborhood. This is our enemy today. And for the country, it's very difficult to fight against this phenomenon because they are citizens like all of us. So I would say that it's the first time after in 2015 that now we have a common interest. And for us, for the Jewish community, it's a huge challenge and it's a huge opportunity because in the first time we can cooperate, we can work with the authority, we can share a knowledge with them, they can share a knowledge with us, we can train together. And I believe it will give us, to all the society, not only to the Jew, but also for the Jew, they will give us a better security in the coming years because we see what we see in the last 5 years, that the governments understood that there's a terror in Europe, there's a problem in Europe, and it needs to protect all the citizens, and among them, the Jewish citizen. Because in the end, the responsibility to protect the government have the responsibility to protect the citizen. It's not, and among them the Jewish. It's not the responsibility of the Jewish community. So I think for us it's a big challenge, but also it's a huge opportunity to give a better security to the Jewish communities in Europe. And I would like to finish with one thing that for me it's very important because there's two things also change. The first thing, we saw during many, many years until, I would say again, until the last 2015, I don't see enough the responsibility of the community leaders for the security in the community. They are dealing maybe with education, maybe with other things, but the security, I think, for me, it's the most important thing. For sure, for other people, it's not the most important thing, but we saw the statistic in the last few years. The Jewish people are afraid to go to the synagogue. They are afraid to send the children to the school. So if the people will not feel that they are secure enough, I don't see how the community can survive. So the community leader needs to take much more responsibility. They need to give much more sources to the security. They need to protect better the facility. And I would say that if I take the many European countries, and I really know all of them, but I'm sure that community leaders in Europe, in many countries, they are protecting better their own house, or better their own car, or better their own business. But when you are coming to the community, we see still many communities that the door is open and everybody can go and can come. And we're speaking about 100 or 1,000 people in the big holiday, they are not protected. So one thing is the responsibility of the community leaders, and you need to be responsible. It's your responsibility. And the second thing, it's the community's member. It's not enough today. Before we thought it's only the protector, it's enough to train them and to teach them and to work with them. Today it's not enough anymore. Today everybody needs to help. Because like I mentioned before, the threat is not coming from Iran or from the Middle East. The threat is coming from your neighbor, from your friend maybe. So it's very important that everybody today, each community member who sees something suspicious, he needs to be aware. He needs to call to the police, he needs to do something. It's not enough to count only the protector. And the last thing, and in this I finish, the authority. Like I said before, today it's a big challenge, but also a big opportunity. And I think it's the first time that we, the Jewish communities, with all our experience of 70 years of security, we can also give something to the authority. We can also teach, we can also share our experience. And I think for us it's also a good opportunity to have a better relationship with the authority. And with that, I would like to finish for now.
Well, thank you very much, Ophir. There's a couple of questions I'd like to ask at the end, but I'm sure the audience would also love a chance to ask you about various aspects of that. Ernest, if you'd like to take over now.
Thank you very much, Kim. Well, first of all, before I start, I would also very much like to thank to the Jewish Confederation of Ukraine and its partners for actually organizing this event and providing a platform to discuss these important topics, not only the one that we are discussing right now, but all these topics that were discussed in the previous 3 days as well. It's an honor to be here, and it was an honor to listen to all the participants. Now, in the past 10 to 15 years, we have witnessed a change, and as Ophir said, there was not much statistical change when it comes to terrorism, but we have witnessed a big change. We have many surveys, Moshe Kantor Center, European Union Fundamental Rights Agency, Jewish organizations, local, like CST or SPSG, the security organizations in the respective European countries, all agree on one thing. Jews feel less safe today than they did 10 or 15 years ago. And the reason for this is actually twofold. One, we said maybe the number of attacks did not change so much, but definitely the awareness and the transparency of these attacks did. So there is a reason why both Ophir and I started doing our jobs some 5 or 4 years ago, because this is when our departments were founded. Our departments were founded on the base and the request of the Jewish communities, because they said, this is not enough. What we are having right now, it's not enough, and we do not feel safe. So what do we do? What Ophir does, what I'm doing, and what other people in our field are doing? Well, first of all, we coordinate and cooperate. It took us some time to organize, but once we did, we realized that, and it's just a fact, together we are stronger. Ophir and I cooperate. We cooperate very much with our Israeli counterparts. Unfortunately, they're the ones with the vast experience. And recently, we started to cooperate with our counterparts and to exchange ideas in the United States. Now, of course, the reason for this is that terror, as such, in the last 10 years, spread much more outside of the borders of the Middle East. We've witnessed incidents against Jewish people, Jewish way of life, or Jewish institutes everywhere. In Ukraine, in Russia, in Poland and Hungary, Germany, France and Belgium, of course, but also in other places like Australia and India, like Uruguay, and most recently, of course, in United States. So what is there? Ophir mentioned 3 things, and I 100% agree. There are 3 things that we need to take into account. One is the community, one is the authorities, and then there is within the community the leadership and the membership of the community. Now, we try to apply what we call a holistic approach. You cannot look at security only as securing a building with physical means or having paid guards outside of the door of a synagogue or outside the Jewish school. To really cover all the bases, we need to apply this holistic approach. And this starts by assessing the threats on each individual community and applying the means that are actually fit and tailor-made for this community. What you need in Reykjavik, in Iceland, in a newly formed Jewish community is very much different from what you need when it comes to security in Istanbul Jewish community. Now, that's where we start from. We analyze the threats. Now, number 2 is obviously we need to secure our facilities. We need physical security, it's number 1, but we also need people. Whether in the form of volunteers, who are highly trained volunteers protecting their own communities, paid guard, combination of the 2, and ideally in combination with the police force and authorities themselves. Now, all this is great But without the previous awareness, we wouldn't get there at all. Ophir mentioned the crucial step, the crucial role of, and the crucial understanding of responsibility. Yes, we believe the responsibility lies in the respective countries and their authorities. Jewish community in Turkey belongs to the Turkish Jews, but they are first and foremost also Turkish citizens. They pay taxes in Turkey, and protection should be offered to their citizens the same way in Turkey, in Germany, in United States as elsewhere. One can very easily understand that this level of understanding with the authorities is not exactly the same in each country. So across the board, we have a variety of approaches by different authorities towards the security of the Jewish communities in their own countries. Now, the second layer, if you like, of the responsibility really lies in the communities, and if you like, community leadership that were democratically elected in those communities. It is expected from leadership, if not legally, then morally, to protect their communities the same way they would protect their families. The way we feel about communities is exactly the same. When we make a decision about security of the community, the first question that we ask ourselves is, if this is my family, what would I do? And this is the approach that we have. Now, with awareness of leadership of the Jewish community comes the awareness of the membership. If the leaders of the community are aware and are conscious of the need and the need and the importance of the security in their communities, they will make sure that the membership is also aware. And this actually then leads to easily recruiting the volunteers for security and easily recruiting the volunteers for the crisis management. I didn't mention one, and the last thing, but this is also very important. Crisis management is a very important item of the overall holistic approach to security because, as Ophir said, there is no 100% security and incidents do happen. Let's say theoretically that incident happens and nobody got hurt. Even that incident psychologically affects and shocks the community. If there is no crisis management team in place that knows how to deal with crisis and knows how to transfer the community from the state of shock to the state of, back to the state of routine, this state of shock can, instead of days, last for weeks and months. So all these things that I just mentioned right now are what it takes to make sure that one community is safe. Now, how can Jewish communities transfer this and actually be promoters and help the world, promote world security and safety is another question. Community on the basic level is one, but then the communities as network, and if you like, under the umbrella of European Jewish Congress or Euro-Asian Jewish Congress or Latin American or World Jewish Congress, obviously creates a completely different leverage. But I have a message really on right now for the communities on the basic level, because this is where some communities are doing a very good job and some communities have still a long way to go. What we need really is understanding of the leadership of the communities, that security is needed and that communities need to get involved. We cannot rely only on the local police forces. No matter how good service they give, we also have a certain part of responsibility. Second of all is awareness of the community as large, the community membership. And then this is where we bridge. This is where we make a bridge. We need authorities who also understand our needs and are willing to cooperate with us. Only then we can step up the level and make a change. And once we do make a change on the local level, we will be able to offer this know-how that there's a vast pool of experience among Jewish communities and around the world from which other communities can benefit on the local level, on the global level. After Sri Lanka and Christchurch, it's very obvious that it's not Jewish communities and Jewish places of worship that are under threat only. This is a global phenomenon, but there is something that we as Jewish communities can bring to the table and can help to other communities for whom maybe this is something that is somewhat of a new phenomenon.
Ernest, thank you very much. Ophir, thank you very much. Can I just throw a couple of very quick questions at you before inviting the audience to ask their questions? You both mentioned that the terror threat has come outside the Middle East now. We see homegrown terrorists taking part in attacks. The obvious question which we journalists have written about is, with the end, for the time being, of ISIS and Caliphate until they reinvent themselves under another name, do you think the terror threat from Islamist fundamentalism is going to be much more homegrown in various countries, not just the obvious ones, but you mentioned the wide range? But the first question, how dangerous is that? The second question, again, very briefly, is do you guys think you are getting enough cooperation from the security services and the police of other countries?
I'll try to make it very briefly, because we can speak about it, 1 week. If I take only the Middle East and the Africa, there's around 1,500 organizations like ISIS. We are speaking about only ISIS, but there's many, many, many organizations. And there's no vacuum in this world. Now ISIS is maybe finished in the Middle East, but there's going to be now a new organization, and cruel one, and is going to make a terrible thing, because it's very important for them, the media. So to be able to have the coverage in the media, they're going to make a terrible thing like we saw that ISIS made in the Middle East. We need to understand that it doesn't matter of ISIS or another organization. In the end, the vision of the radical Muslim is the same vision. Either they are ISIS, or either they are another organization, or either it's Hamas or another one. In the end, the vision is that all the world will be in the same color, in the green color. The green color is the Islam. So it's not important if now it's ISIS, as tomorrow, before it was Al-Qaeda and another one, and there's many, 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 many groups. Like I mentioned before, there's more than 1,500 groups. So I think what is going to happen now, only the battlefield is going to change, is going to move. They're going to go now to a soft target. And when I'm saying soft target, it's a country like Sri Lanka. It's a weak country with a weak security. It's easy for them to attack them. They're going to go to New Zealand, to America, unfortunately. Because in America, the Jewish community doesn't have security, and the other minority doesn't have security. So it's not going to change. Only the area will change. This is one thing. So I think that we are only in the beginning of the huge wave that is not going to finish. It's going to be stronger and stronger. And if I go back to Europe, we see what happened with the immigrants who are coming, and now the wife are going to come, and the children are going to come. We see what happened in the mosque. And I think it's not going to stop, exactly the contrary. If the authorities are doing enough, there's no authority here. So I can tell you that I don't think that they are doing enough for the Jewish communities. I think it's the time for them to understand that they have the responsibility. The authority needs to protect us. And they have two possibilities, either to have, like in Italy, a policeman around our building 24 hours a day, or either to support, to give money to the communities and to have a private company. But it's only a matter of time. Our mission, our goal is to prevent. It's not to wait till something happen, like it's happened in America, and now everybody wants more security, or it's happened in Sri Lanka or in another place. Now everybody is crying and is shouting to have more security. Our mission is to prevent. And to prevent is by two ways, either by the community leaders that need to understand it's important enough, and the other thing by the authority. And for the moment, unfortunately, the authority, they are not doing enough. And this is, again, another mission of the leaders, of you, to push them to give a better security.
Ernest, if you could very quickly, because I think people want to talk, ask you questions very quickly. Leaving aside the first part about ISIS, and if you can very briefly answer the second part of the question, which is, do you guys get enough cooperation from individual security services and police? Very briefly.
Right. I'll try to make it very briefly. It really depends from country to country, and I would resonate what Ophir just said is, in general, the answer would be probably not. Then, of course, I don't want to undermine those places where actually there is enough cooperation and there is enough support by the authorities. But in general, the answer would have to be no. Now, if you look at the world's map, in Europe, things changed dramatically in the last 10 to 15 years. United States is still has to go through that road, and other parts of the world, it really depends from country to country. Now, if you like, you know, we've seen some moves. There is, and Ophir and I, with our organizations, are really also contributed and worked on this. In December last year, in the European Union, the declaration has been passed on fighting anti-Semitism and securing the Jewish communities. Now, this is a piece of paper. Let's make it clear. It's only a piece of paper. Implementing this declaration is what needs to happen on the ground with each Ministry of Interior, with each chief of the police, and this is now all of our job to actually get words into action and to get this done. What we've seen by this declaration is the first signal by the European Union that there is a will and intent to do something about it. From that to changes things on the ground will take time, and I'm pretty sure in some countries it will be sooner, some countries it will take more time, and I just hope, and some countries maybe probably never, but I hope that we will learn and we will prevent, rather than be a Monday morning quarterback, as they say in America, and wait for something to happen to raise a red flag and say we need to do something in Sri Lanka now, or we need to do something in some other place now. We should be smarter than that, and we should make changes now and prevent. Unfortunately, then it's not so easy to measure how efficient you are, because there were no attacks.
Of course.
But not having the attacks is also a good statistic.
I would like just 1 minute. I would like to share with you one thing and to continue what Ernest said. You know, before the attack in Toulouse, the community leaders and especially the rabbi of the Otzar Torah, he mentioned that in Toulouse nothing will happen. Why the enemy will come to Toulouse? He can go to Paris. It's much more attractive. Nothing will happen. The God is protecting us. And after in this attack, that 4 people died and his daughter died. After the attack he came, now tell me what to do. Now I'm ready to make everything. But why not to make it before? Why to make it after? So this is the question that we are asking all the time. And our mission and your mission is to prevent, to make the maximum that nothing will happen. Because if it's happened, it's too late. It's already happened.
Well, very good point. You know, the need, the pressing need to be proactive rather than reactive. So the floor is yours, ladies and gentlemen. Questions? And if you can say whether you want to address your question to either of your Ernest or both, for that matter.
First, I'm Andrew Srulovich. I'm with the Anti-Defamation League in the United States. I did want to take a bit of issue with a statement from my good friend Ophir about saying that there's no security in the United States. There is certainly inadequate security. We are still at the bottom, I would say, of the learning curve, but we are working on it. You know, in the United States in the past 10 years, 75% of the fatal hate crime attacks, extremist attacks, have been from the far right, not from radical Islamists. And we've had certainly these 2 attacks on the synagogues in Pittsburgh and near San Diego, both from the far right. But I will tell you, there were also at least 2 other attacks that didn't happen on synagogues because of our intelligence analysts who caught them in time, reported to the police, and they're under arrest now. So again, we are working on it. We are trying to get better, but and we can certainly learn from European examples.
Thank you. Well, Andrew, well,
I would like to mention
from the States there.
From the state, I would like to mention 2 things, Andrew. First of all, I'm sorry there's start now, and we are working with CSS, like you know, and we are trying to support them and to help them, but You know, a country, community with 6 million, 6 million people, it's a little drop in the ocean, you know, the security, and it's definitely not enough. The security, when we're speaking security, is not only what Ernest said before, it's not only the protector in the building. The security in the building is the last circle. It starts with the intelligence, it starts with many other things. So when we are speaking about the security, we're speaking about all the fields that in the end, it's only the protector and the physical meaning in the building, but it starts long time before, and our goal is to prevent. When I'm saying prevent, it's one of the things, like you mentioned before, in the intelligence and the connection, good relationship with the authority. The other thing that you mentioned, it's very important for us, like a security, and unfortunately, not unfortunately, I mean, this is more than 35 years. For me, when I'm protecting, I don't care if the enemy is from the right side or from the left side or from the Islam or from I don't know from where. When I'm protecting, I see the man who's coming to attack me. After I can ask the question from where he's coming. But when he's coming, I don't care from where he's coming. I need to protect. So I think it's a good question because now we see what we see in Europe also. We see increase of the extreme right. In Europe, in America also, we see it. And our main goal now is to see that because most of the activity, we talked before about ISIS, but it's also about the extreme right, most of the activity is in the social media. And here we think the government and the authority, like we said before, can be much more active to prevent the attack. Because yesterday we heard somebody say there was an attack in Ukraine, and after the attack, the police came and they stopped the people. But our goal is not to wait until something happens. Our goal is to prevent. So the authority, they must be much more active in the social media. They must prevent that. They must stop the people before it's happened, not after it's happened. And this is a huge challenge, and I hope one day we are going to be there.
Okay. Can we have another question? Yes, sir, from you.
Большое спасибо. Я полностью с вами согласен.
Sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
Я чуть-чуть понимаю по-русски и по-украински.
I thought after 3 days you study English.
Okay, I mean, I'm afraid my contraption failed, but I've been given the question and about in Ukraine, particular on attacks on Romas and other minorities and Jews, and you obviously with your Hebrew or Russian, you didn't know. So that's the answer. Ukraine specific, really, from the gentleman there. Perhaps Ernest, you can start on this one.
Okay. I personally am not an expert on Ukraine. I have been working with the communities in Ukraine, so I know a little bit about what is going on here. Ukraine, as a country, is in a very, very specific situation. Ukraine is in the past decade going through, I'm free to say, a state of war in part of its territory. And also, Ukraine, as a part of a global trend that is happening in Eastern Europe, is experiencing something else, which actually has reflection in anti-Semitism. We have noticed this trend from the Baltic states all the way down to the Balkans and former Yugoslavia. and it's whereby the countries after getting their independence either from the Soviet Union or from Yugoslavia as former Yugoslavian republics, obviously there is a certain period in which, if you like, narratives are being created. Narratives on history, because there is obviously a strong feeling that both in Soviet Union, or if you like in Yugoslavia as well, in the Eastern Bloc in general, that the history that we have been taught for the 70 years, it's not actually what was happening on the ground, and there is a need to rewrite. Now, these are the underlying events that are happening really in this part of the world. You don't have this change of narrative, historical narratives in Latin America all of a sudden today, or in Western Europe. Now, as such, with this change comes a fertile ground for anti-Semitism. So all of a sudden you have Jews being accused for being communists and on the side of Stalin. All of a sudden you have these new heroes being proclaimed all across the region, which, because they were fighting Stalin, if you like, or communism, they were proclaimed as heroes, but nevertheless, at the same time, they may have been siding with Nazi Germany. So it's this part of the world, and not Ukraine as such alone, has a very, very specific ground on which anti-Semitism is being brought. Now, to answer your question, how we can make this change and how to get the authorities involved, this is what both Ophir and myself are doing. You can, as Jewish community, use us as leverage as well. We are more than happy to come and together to go talk to the authorities. We did this in the past. Maybe in Ukraine we should do it more. But it's not a question. And now all of a sudden I don't want to single out Ukraine as the country with the biggest problem. It's definitely not in Europe the country with the biggest problem of anti-Semitism. Yes, we do have anti-Semitic incidents here, but I wouldn't say that it's on a steep rise. But again, it's coming back to, I think, what we said before together. It's leadership of the community, awareness, and awareness of what we can really do. And together we can do a lot. And I'm pretty sure that authorities as well, it's very easy to say that they don't want to do anything. But we need also to approach them and to give them our narrative about how we see things and how they should get involved, and actually they should get involved together with us. It's not only them and it's not only us in this situation. It's all of us together.
I would like to add only two things, and to be a little bit more specific about Ukraine, because you asked about Ukraine. I think for people here, they care about Ukraine. So I'm sorry that Ina is not here, the community, the federation director, but we have a special application that I can tell you that we received each week. I don't want to say many, but we received each week a few anti-Semitic events in Kiev, and each of them they are. I think it's a big one. So it exists in Ukraine. But like we mentioned, both of us before today, they asked me from the European Parliament to make them to define the threat in each European country, including the east of Europe. I said today it's impossible. If before you could do it, we said this is number one, this is number two, the threat, the enemy. Today it's impossible, because today I can tell you that everything is peaceful, everything is quiet, and like the people in New Zealand thought that nothing will happen in New Zealand. And then a crazy guy is coming and he starts to shoot or with the knife, and then you're going to, and this is the problem today, that nobody is feeling secure. I talked with a Christian woman in Vienna. She's not a Jewish. She's not under, I don't know, she doesn't feel maybe more stressed like us. And she told me every day that I'm sending my child to the school, I'm afraid that maybe he will not come, because the attack today can happen everywhere, anytime, by everyone. So she can send her child to the school, and somebody crazy can come with a knife. And So this is the problem today. This is the goal of the terror. The goal of the terror of the extreme right is to impose the fear. And this is exactly what they are doing. People are afraid today. And so I think the situation today in most of the country, I would say it's maybe not the same, but it's nearly the same.
I'm afraid we have, well, have we got time for one more question? Or am I going to throw you one more question from the gentleman over there, please.
Thank you very much for your very good briefings. It's very important and very useful for us, for Ukrainians. And I have heard from my colleague, a Ukrainian member, about anti-Semitism in Ukraine. Thank you. I don't want to be opponent to my colleague, Ukrainian, but I think that you know more than citizen of Ukraine. As for me, as for my meaning, we have no anti-Semitism in Ukraine. And yesterday it was mentioned in the briefings, during the briefings. And if somebody want to find some actions against Roms, against Jewish people, against, it's not for the national sphere in this. It is criminal from human to human. But my question for you, what do you feel about the role of the international security organizations and their links with the community of the Jewish community around the world? Do they do their work like they have to do, or they only receive a lot of money and their role is not good if it have to be?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. With the agenda as it is, we've only got about 3 minutes, so
okay, I will
if you can make it as quickly as possible.
Try to make it fast, and you know, first of all, in security, it's never enough. So it's very easy answer. But I would say that, you know, that today people, like I mentioned before, people understood only in the last 3-4 years in Europe that there is a problem. So this is the first step to understand that you have a problem. And I think what we see today, we see a very good cooperation in the two levels. In one level, it's between the state, that they are sharing information, they are training, they are fighting, they understand there is a problem. So we see a very, very good cooperation, because today people can move. They can come from Lita to Ukraine, tomorrow from Ukraine to Paris, and tomorrow from another place. So people are moving, and it's very important to have this cooperation. This cooperation is start to be better and better. And the other thing, it's the cooperation between the Jewish communities. That it's also something that is very important, because people also are sharing this information and are sharing their knowledge and training together. So I think in the boss level, in the authority, and in the Jewish communities, we see a start, we see a beginning of a very good cooperation, and we are only in the beginning.
Ernest?
Okay, look, we started what we are doing really, our organizations, 5 years ago. 5 years ago, there was no European Jewish Congress, there was no World Jewish Congress dealing with security. Our organizations dealt with other things, as you know, what the core business was, if I may say. Now, first of all, if we look at the need of the Jewish communities around the world and the funds that are given for the security of the Jewish communities around the world, it is less than a drop in the sea. So I would really like to address that thing that a lot of money, I'm not sure if it's a lot of money at all. I think, unfortunately, the future and what it brings us, it will require us to invest more money in security. And we didn't even touch United States, where I have to say, you have everything there. 5.5 or to 6 million Jews, them alone are larger than the rest of diaspora of the Jewish people. You have communities there, such as Cleveland, which can be a flagship security community with what they're doing and what they're having. And then you have the ones that probably you can walk into a synagogue the same way you're walking into a supermarket. So there's a big big span over there. By the way, it is in whole of the world. Now, how much international communities can do? I think we're on the right track. The problem that we all of us are facing is, you know, you have a wall with hundreds of holes, and we have only so many arms and legs that we can cover these holes. So this is why it's crucial to have this synergy of international Jewish organizations. A lot of them can be leveraged through them, but the Jewish communities themselves on the ground, on the local level, and the authorities, again, I would say when I talk about the authorities, I talk about the local authorities, ministries of interior, secret services, local police forces, but also on regional levels, whether it's OAS in the Americas, whether it's the European Union in Europe, Europol, Interpol. In a nutshell, we should get the good guys working together. It's been, I think it's been about time. It's actually past the time that all of us should start going into the same direction. And even then, I'm pretty sure there will be a community that is not getting and satisfying all the security needs.
One second, with your permission, I would like to add one thing to your question. That, you know, a few months ago we finished a security project here in Kiev. That the European Jewish Congress founds a security project here in Kiev in the synagogue. I forgot the name. I think it's Shalom Aleichem, if I remember good, the name of the synagogue. And until then, until we came and we financed the project and we found the project, the synagogue was closed. They managed to open the synagogue only after we gave the money and we finished the project. So I think, and that one I speak about the big synagogue. I don't speak about the many synagogues we're building around the country. I speak about Kiev. So I think there's many things to do.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think it's an eloquent account of the threat we face, how it's going to be with us, and how perhaps we can rise above it with proper preparation and unity and resilience. So thank you very much for that, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your round of applause for the moderator as well. And yes, we have extended a bit the time for this panel because it's about lives. And the next panel is of no less importance, and it will be moderated by Vlad Davidzon, author at Tablet Magazine, chief editor of the Odessa Review, which is an evidence of his capacities as a moderator. I think that he is the only person here who will moderate the panel twice. The participants in the panel, which is called The Importance of Memorializing, are Philippe Carmel, Chief Executive of the European Jewish Cemeteries Initiative. Please, Mr. Carmel, if you're here, proceed to the stage. Samuel Klieger, Director of Russian and Eurasian Affairs, American Jewish Committee. We know him already. A person whom I personally wanted to thank for, well, all that he has done for former Soviet citizens, for Jews and Ukrainians and Russians and whoever. Yosef Zissels, co-president, VAD, Ukraine, a former political prisoner and a person whom many people in this country admire. And also Yana Barinova, Executive Director of Babin Yar Holocaust Memorial Center. Please proceed, Mr. Zissels. And Ms. Barinova. Is she? Well, anyway, she was planned to take part. I'm sure that the people who are here will be able to represent the importance of memorializing and impress it on our minds in an adequate way. Vlad, it's time for you to take over.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you yet again. Hi, hello again, friends. Just a little housekeeping before we start. I have a flight to London in half an hour, so we're going to speak English. Mr. Klieg will speak in English, and after that, Sam will show his Russian-American side by taking over as moderator for me. He's going to bail me out while I go to the airport. So we're going to start in English, and then Mr. Klieger will take over as the next chairperson of a panel, and after that, Mr. Zulz will speak, okay? So, without any further ado, because we're running over the limit of the time, it's a panel about memory policy, which is an extraordinarily important topic in this moment, especially when Ukraine is in the midst of a national state building enterprise. When building a nation state, we also need to write a history or rediscover a history, or in some cases rewrite a history, right? The Ukrainians are now in the midst of a state-building enterprise and a state-building history, so it's very important that they look at forgotten histories, or histories that have not gotten quite enough attention, or have been overlooked, or have been, for particular, mostly ideological reasons, forgotten. So, I do want to say one thing, which I think is very important, in the context of what the JUC is doing, what the Jewish-Ukrainian Confederation is doing here. Mr. Loshkin's flagship project, a City of a Righteous project, or a Street of a Righteous project, they are renaming, this is their flagship project, they are renaming city streets all across Ukraine for writers. It is a project of World War II memory, of Holocaust memory. It's very important. I'm very glad that Boris Loshkin is doing this. It's an extremely important and useful thing that our friends in the JUC are doing. So, because we're short on time, I'm just going to skip the introductions, and we're going to go straight to Mr. Phil Carmel, who's going to, I think, do a little PowerPoint, yeah? And then after that to Mr. Singer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vlad. I'd like to make a short presentation here. I just want to give you a few very short figures to put these things into perspective. Before the war, there was something like 1,500 Jewish communities which had existed in this country for the last 400 years or so. Between the Elbe and the Dnipro, there were 8,000 Jewish communities. Most of those, of course, were wiped out in the Shoah. We as Jews do Holocaust memory extremely well on a macro basis. In other words, we understand that more than 1 million people were killed in Auschwitz, that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. But taking that onto a micro basis so that people in towns and villages understand the destruction of Jewish communities, the destruction of Jewish heritage in this country, and not just Jewish heritage, because Jewish heritage was an integral part of Ukrainian heritage, making sure that Ukrainians now take that on board and protect it together with us. So I'll make this presentation now. We set up this operation in 2015. And the question is begged why it took the Jewish world 70 years to deal with the issue of Jewish cemeteries. And the reason is because it was perceived as a black hole. Nobody knew how much it would cost. Nobody knew it was possible. Nobody knew that we would get the cooperation of local authorities and national governments to do it. We work in these countries. Up till this date, we have fenced 85 cemeteries across Ukraine. I want to give you some examples of the problems that we face. Here in Lipetska Polyana in Zakarpattia Oblast, there is a Jewish cemetery on the right-hand side next to a Christian cemetery. Over the course of the last 40 years, individually, graves have been dug up from the Jewish cemetery and replaced with Christian graves. Jews have not been there for 50, 60, 70 years, and that's a situation which we've seen here in the Zakarpattia Oblast and in other places as well. Here in Nadvina, in Ivano-Frankivsk Oblast, is an example of desecration, and these are other problems. But mostly, the problems that we see are neglect. The fact that Jews do not live in these places anymore has meant that these cemeteries are threatened. Here in Zbaraj, with the help of the local authority, we recently fenced. This is an example of a fenced Jewish cemetery in a town which had over 60% of its population before the war were Jewish. Sorry. We should go forward rather than back. This is a fence that we did in Kremnitz. But we can only protect a certain amount. There are probably 1,500 sites in this country. The question is, what do we do to ensure that places that we cannot yet protect are protected? And therefore, as a result of funding which we've received from the European Union, we have developed a system of monitoring in cooperation with local authorities and surveying with the details online. 1,500 sites will be surveyed this year in 5 project countries, including here in Ukraine, with over 1,000 sites done here. The material is put immediately online with photographs, and it is done through drone technology. Material is sent straight from the field into our central hub in Kyiv, and immediately 3D models are drawn up so that projects are ready to be taken place straight away. This is an example of a Jewish cemetery in Transcarpathia. But the key issue, the most important issue, is the cooperation of local authorities. I want to say here to members of the Ukrainian Parliament and to members and to people who are involved in local authorities here, after having fenced 85 sites in this country over the last four years, we have not encountered a single Ukrainian local authority that has not cooperated fully. And I want to thank, on behalf of our organisation and on behalf of our funders and our board, all the Ukrainian people who've been involved in this project. Secondly, to take this project on, we must involve young people. I want to say what I usually say to people at a rededication ceremony, which usually involves a local school, that people should realize that in the lives of their grandparents, in these towns and villages across Ukraine, there was terrible carnage that went on. It went on against Jews, but it also went on against Ukrainians and Belarusians and Roma and many other people as well. We need those people, those young people, to understand and internalize what went on there. The cemetery is the last witness of a Jewish community which existed there. When people visit that cemetery, they know that a Jewish community existed there, and then they are forced to ask why the Jewish community is no longer there. And the reason for that is, of course, xenophobia and anti-Semitism and intolerance. I want to finish off here with an example of a cooperation which took place, a wonderful cooperation with a Ukrainian girl of 15 years old in the town of Derajne in Rivne Oblast. It's a short film. I hope the sound.
Це є гірка, дуже відома серед дітей, на якій завжди взимку багато веселощів і такого подібного. Але мене ще в дитинстві завжди бентежив той факт, що це все на кладовищі.
Dorajny this year. And Dorajny is a little bit complicated because it's in a forest as well. It's not owned by the village council, it's owned by the Forestry Commission. The fact that Katie said that I want you to do this in my village made sure that we prioritised on this site, and she is responsible more than anybody else. We cannot protect these cemeteries on our own. We are not here in these towns and villages, particularly the small villages like this. We depend on local people to be involved in the protection of the cemetery because it's their heritage, it's not just our heritage.
Село Дражне було заселене євреями не лише в ХХ столітті, а і до того в певний час це було взагалі абсолютно єврейське містечко. І ми намагаємось відшукати родичів євреїв, які тут жили. Поки що це безуспішно, але все ж ми на шляху до мети.
Okay, Mr. Singer, you have a. Okay.
Which language?
As you like to.
Okay, I'll start with English. Good afternoon again. Memory and memorization has to do with history. And history, as you know, is a very, very tricky thing. In 2011, here in Kyiv, there was a commemoration of 65th anniversary of Babi Yar. Many of you attended. I believe that was President Yushchenko at that time. But anyway, there was a big commemoration, big gathering, international gathering. When everything finished, I took a cab to go to my hotel. And the cab driver was a young man in his 20s. And he was a little nervous, and he said, why there are so many cars, so many government officials here, going here and there? And I said, well, you don't know, there's a commemoration of 65th anniversary of Babi Yar. And he said, what is Babi Yar? Okay, I told him, I go, you know, in September 29, 1941, 34,000 Jews were killed at this place by Germans. And he opened his blue eyes, looking at me and said, they were killed? For what? And that's the question that hurt me as well. For what? This naive young person simply does not know, and he was born in Kyiv. So let's not have too much expectation of commemorations and everything. People don't know. I bet right now that if we do a study in Kyiv, asking young people, and they're up to 30 maybe 35, if they know what is Babi Yar and what happened here, my guess, 80% will know nothing. And again, history is very tricky. Some semesters I'm teaching history in the American college, American History 1. And I asked them about the history of World War II. I take the blackboard, I put it in two parts, who was on this part and who was on that part. And out of probably 20 students, only 2 can get it right. They are confused. Japan with America, with Italy, with Great Britain, France, Poland, Russia, people are confused. They don't know. People don't know history, and people are not interested in history. Does it mean that we should not commemorate? Of course not. Does it mean that we should not, build a museum in Babi Yar? Of course not. Absolutely yes. The cemeteries we have to preserve, and many other things we have to do. But again, we have to understand that the Holocaust remembrance needs everyday work and needs everyday education. The memorial, Babi Yar Memorial, will be functional if every day there will be school children who will come every day to the Babi Yar as a mandatory class. That's why maybe in 10 years, when I will take again the cab in Kyiv, a person will know what is Babi Yar, otherwise, no way. And because history is a very tricky thing, I think we have to take good care of historical memory. Some of my friends here in Ukraine, they said, and they are right, they said, don't let them choose their heroes. Every nation has a right to choose who will be its heroes. That's fine with me. Please go ahead and choose who will be your heroes. However, if you have such a right to choose your heroes, I have a right to have some doubt about, is your choice right or is your choice wrong, based on the facts that we know. We have some concerns, frankly speaking. We in America, the American Jewish Community, we have some concerns about heroization and glorification of those organizations and individuals who participated together with Nazi, collaborated with them in murdering hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian Jews. No matter what motive was there, fighting against Stalin, thinking that all the Jewish, babushka, dedushka, and so on are, Bolsheviks, that they created Holodomor and so on, no matter what motive is. The fact is, on this land, there were many thousands of Jewish people killed by local collaborators. And it should be said. That's number one. Number two, on the other hand, there were thousands of people, I believe more than 3,000 people, righteous among the nations. Those who, risking their lives, save Jewish kids, Jewish people, and that's an enormous heroic act. This is real heroism of an enormous magnitude. I cannot imagine how would I risk my life and the life of my family to save an Ukrainian kid. I don't know. But they did it. As a matter of fact, in my family was a story when a Ukrainian woman went and said, first kill me and then kill him. And that's why I think that Ukrainian people, Ukrainian civil society, first of all, Ukrainian NGOs, they have the obligation, they, not the Jewish community, the Ukrainian civil society has an obligation to build memorial for those Ukrainians who are real heroes, because this is a pride of Ukrainian people. This is a pride of Ukrainian nation. Definitely, Jewish community will help them. definitely we can work together to build such a monument. And that's why we suggested to Boris Loshkin to work together on, let's say, erecting a monument to the righteous among the nations, Ukrainian righteous among the nations. Here in Kyiv, in central place somewhere, to erecting one symbolic monument to all 3,000 people or more who saved. And the initiative, in my opinion, should come from Ukrainian civil society, with, of course, the support from the Jewish people, because we say only thank you. But this is the hero of Ukrainian nations. At this optimistic point, I will wrap up. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any question you may have.
I'm going to run to the airport. I just want to. I'm going to hand over the gavel to Sam 1 second. I want to say thank you, first of all, to everyone for being here. This is a tremendous thing. Just being here for 2 days, I have an immense impression of the fact that this country is going in the right direction, that Jewish memory and Jewish community are being built here, that this country is building something very special, and that we're in a kind of inaugural moment of this forum, which I think will go on for many years, and I hope we'll all come back and see each other. So, thank you again for coming. Thank you to Tomasz and Tatiana and to Boris Loshkin for inviting me. I'm going to hand this over to my friend Sam, and I hope not to miss my flight. So, gentlemen.
Thank you, Vlad, for moderating at least part of this panel. And now I would like to introduce a legendary figure, Joseph Zissels, a good friend of mine, good friend of AGC, a person who did a lot for the Jewish community in Ukraine, for understanding and cooperation between American Jewry and Ukrainian Jewish community. His biography is fascinating. You can find it on the website. That's why I'm not going to prolong this introduction. Yosef will be speaking in Russian language. So those of you who don't understand, please take your earpieces and listen to what Joseph is going to say. Joseph Zissels.
Спасибо за такое представление.
Thank you for this presentation. Well, I was invited to present myself. I would like to talk about the different projects on memorialization. So, well, yesterday, after Zeninhain presentation, the person who just paid a lot of attention about different identity issues of the global Jewry. So, well, we just started to think about the Jewish Ukrainian identity, or Ukrainian and Jewish identity. And I must admit that we communicated with Dr. Hanin for a long period of time, and that's a kind of a result of our communication. So, well, how the Jewry was divided into different parts since 1990s, and how all the identities established, etc. So, well, and that was a kind of a message. So I can talk Ukrainian, I can speak Ukrainian and Russian, and I do understand that Ukrainian language is in the beginning for become the Ukrainian language as the language of communication. Yet it's on the way. But I also would like to say a few words about memorization. Memory movement, memorization. I remember I remember everything started in the end of 1980s, how there was the revival for Jewish community life, so how the renovation was done, and it was done through the first projects devoted to the process of memorization. There was the first memorial projects to memorize the memory on the people who were killed locally in the different areas in Ukraine, and I started to explain how Holocaust plays a very important role in the structure of identity of Jewish people, because the awful tragedy was in Ukraine, and then about 1.5 million were killed in Ukraine. So, according with the statistics, we just deal with the statistics, and VAD Ukraine deals with the statistics. So we have the mass graves of 2,000 mass graves all around Ukraine. What does it mean, mass graves? The place where more than 50,000 people were killed. So we can say that it's approximate number, because we do not know the archive data precise, and we have to restore all the data, and we can get the German archives with the more detailed information, but unfortunately even them are not available to provide us with the information about the all mass graves in Ukraine. And talk about the identity, I want to say that the issue on Holocaust is the very important issue, even the leading issue. And talking about the other forms of identity we talked about previously, I think Holocaust is also within the structure of identity of the Israeli Jewish people. But they are not thinking about Holocaust as a leading thing, a leading point, because the Western European Jewish people, they're just still thinking about that. And more than 2,000 places, about half of that were from our side. We've done some research, and it was very fundamental to find the possibility to get the funds and support. Just only half of that places can have some specific memorial announcement about the Jewish people were killed there. We had lots of efforts just to rename even the announcements, because it was just the announcement about the Soviet people killed, and there was the Soviet citizens who were killed. But for us, it was very important to replace the so-called Soviet people into Jewish people. It was very important for us, and all that mass graves still have the specific memorial tables about the Soviet people, but not Jewish people. So in the beginning of 1990s, we started to deal with the books of memories. Lots of Jewish communities have this already published books of memory. And based on these books of memory, we can restore the whole picture of what happened during the time of the Holocaust. And so we can restore the names of all that people who were killed that time. And the lots of influence we got from the so-called unity of that Jewish people who were from that areas. So we can say that a lot of people from Mohilov, Podilsky, Starozhenets, Chernovitz, and others, those who were born in that place, those who were from that place, because of the efforts, we could restore the Jewish cemetery, and we erected the monuments and to commemorate those victims of Holocaust. As of today, after 30 years, when we started this process of renovation of Jewish life, we can mention that we are developing the process of memorization, but we have a lot to be done, not for 1 decade, even for more than a decade. And So that's some graves and memories. That's what we could do, and some cemeteries are located so far, and it's very hard to reach that places. But we would like to thanks to many organizations, those who supported us, and some of that areas already got the monuments, some in process. But I would like to pay your attention about this very important things to memorize these spaces. We have to memorize, we have to erect the monuments, we have to put the right announcement, the right description on the memorials. So, well, we do have different aspects: scientific, educational, and the so-called promotional. And as Mr. Sam Klieger told us before, not many people, they do not know about the Holocaust. And so
of the Holocaust. Since 1997 here, we've had a major project that has gone far beyond the organization. The project which is called What to Learn from Holocaust. It is done by the Center of Holocaust Research in Kiev and the Center UMA in Dnipropetrovsk that is doing the job headed by Dr. Shipak. These centers have been doing a lot of job for 2 decades in teaching at Holocaust level in Ukraine, in high school and universities. The same lectures are done in libraries and other institutions. More than 1,000 history teachers and other humanitarians have been involved. Hundreds of seminars have been held, and many teachers have visited Yad Vashem seminars to come back here with new knowledge. They're given different handouts issued by these centers. No situation abroad. I can say that these Holocaust lessons take a large volume, and they only 4 hours are given to study the Holocaust in academic program in schools, but beyond that a lot is taught in a week near Kiev. High school students will get together. I'm speaking about Ukrainian high schools. They do their own projects to give their ideas of what they learn from Holocaust, and about 100 projects like this have been brought to another seminars. Seminars have been held since 2001, and the best projects are published as a book, the best projects of kids, the memory of Holocaust. We would praise this project. We can't say it is sufficient because it's the business of NGOs rather than the state that from one hand does not prevent, but on the other hand I would like them to be more active in helping this. It's also very important to say that today we've come to a point when a series of researchers have appeared, not only Jewish but also Ukrainian researchers who have been studying Holocaust in this country, and they pay attention to Holocaust various areas of Ukraine, because you might not, part of Ukraine was occupied by Romania. Quite a large part of the south of Ukraine was occupied by Romania, and other parts was occupied by German army, and specific features of Holocaust are different in these different areas of Ukraine. And they, the researchers are studying this special feature. That's why they memorializing projects done in various areas. We have to bear in mind these specific features and to underline that, because it's important to speak about Holocaust. We have also to underline these specific features. I could list a series of projects that are being done in Ukraine today. Now that these projects are quite expensive, whereas the Jewish community is poor, then it is clear that local Ukrainian communities have lack of funds. Now that mass graves are scattered around towns or major cities, so without the help from Israel, Germany, and the United States, wouldn't have been able to do part of the job that has been done over the last 30 years. Like the Fox Elevation project, which is called Let's Protect Memory, that has been done in Ukraine for several years now. We are involved in this project too, but the main structure in Ukraine that is involved in this project, the Ukrainian Center of Holocaust Studies, headed by Anatoly Podolsky. Their partners of this project are Foreign Ministry of Germany and Memorial Fund of Jews Killed in Europe. And due to these organizations, these projects are being done. What they have done over the last 3 years in 3 areas of Ukraine, Lviv, Volyn, and Rovno, 5 large memorials have been opened. American Jewish community, and Baker, who is here, is aware of those projects, and they also accompanied, support this project and process of implementation. It has been done in 3 oblasts, 3 areas of Ukraine, and this year in the oblast of Zhytomyr, Vinnytsia, another 11 major memorials will open. These memorials have some advantages in comparison with the minor ones, because they are more informative. They have major research support, but they are quite expensive. Due to Foreign Ministry of Germany, we could have brought some funds for such memorials. Thus, one memorial cost was $2,000 on average, which is quite impossible for minor local communities. I discussed with organizers of the project, so I said that it could be a good idea to make more sites like this that could be cheap. Of course, I didn't manage to convince, but let's count for yourself 16 memorials like this over the last 5 years, and still we have about 2,000 sites ahead of us, which means that we'll have to work for decades at the same level. And unless we are thankful to the German government for allocating funds for such projects and for taking care of Jewish cemeteries. Also, I could mention a project that has recently begun. It is done by the center, headed by Maria Luisa Beck, a member of Bundestag. They have conducted a number of memorial projects, and on the 5th of September this year, such a project will take place in Chernovitz. Over the last decade, Ukraine has created a series of real museums. The first museum was set up in Odessa, a Jewish museum, and in such museum, part of exhibits are devoted to the Holocaust in pure form, like we can see in Europe or in the United States. The Museum of Holocaust does not exist so far. There are some designs and ideas in this direction. Now we could highlight the Dnipropetrovsk Museum of Jewish History, Ukrainian Jewish history. It's a large museum taking an area of about 2,000 square kilometers, which devotes a lot to Holocaust in Ukraine, and Museum Chernovtsi, which has a stand devoted to the beginning of Holocaust in Ukraine. Now this project has been expanded, and over the last years we have been doing a major project on creating the Museum of the Holocaust, which will tell not only about the golden age of Jews in Ukraine, but also about that. We've also renovated the building at the entrance of the Jewish cemetery. The cemetery has two sites of mass graves that will be part site of exhibition complex of this museum. This project will last another 5 years. Now that the state does not help, it depends on fundraising, and we are conducting this fundraising across the world to find funds for continuation of the project. We are now designing concepts. A group of experts headed by Dr. Boris Haimovich from Israel, who are writing concepts, and the framework concept has already been done. Also, architecture design is now been made for this museum, which will be defended at various councils. These historical buildings, writing, text, decorations, and we want to get back to its authentic look, to make it as a memorial of culture. The museum will take about 1,000 square meters, but we're still far away from implementing this project. I want to move to a very important part, and namely Babi Yar. Over those years, and I've already said about this, in 2 days, on 29th and 30th of September 1941, over 33,000 Jews were killed, the evidence of which are German archives. The quite correct numbers being about further destiny. There's no such precise information either in German archives or other places. That's why the general estimates of Jews killed in Babi Yar is different. Nowadays, researchers working at various institutions and museums agree that about 100,000 people are killed in Babi Yar, and 2/3 of them accounted for Jews, not only from Kiev but also other places of Ukraine. During the last decades, since 1960s, there had been a series of projects that tried to be implemented. Unfortunately, they have not been implemented. Only history of them is remained, and this history should also be reflected on those projects that have not been implemented in Babi Yar. The time just not come. Now we have different situation. Now we have not one project but two projects. Situation has changed last February, when in addition to the projects that was announced in 2016 during the memorial events at Babi Yar, that time the project was presented, and behind this initiative were Michael Friedman, Paul Khan, and Michael Fuchs from Russia. That was announced. President Poroshenko came to this presentation, and he said he wanted to be head of this project, and his family foundation is ready to support, to give financial support to this project. In one way or another, this project has been done. There is historical narrative. I'm not going to go into details about this project because, unfortunately, Yana Barin was here yesterday. He is co-head of this project, but she had to leave, and she couldn't make it here. I'm going to tell you about another project that was announced last February in the Interfax agency. This Ukrainian project on realizing of this side. This project includes huge territory, about 7 hectares, not only territory of historical Babi Yar, but also adjacent cemeteries, and also the site of the tragedy of 1961 in Kurenyovka, when man-made disaster took place and 1,500 KYIVs died. This project consists of 2 parts. This is Moral Park of 7 hectares. Then the actual museum of Babi Yar victims and Ukrainian Holocaust Museum. I could emphasize main features of these 2 projects and their differences. First of all, projects that I have mentioned, first presented by Yana Barinova, its narrative is universal. It covers the whole of Eastern Europe and beyond. The Ukrainian Museum of Holocaust and Second project done on request of Ukraine's government. It is done by a group of history scientists of Ukraine. This group is composed of 15 history science headed by Ukrainian Jewish history science. So this is one of the difference. Another difference is that the second project approaches more delicately to the issues of Jewish history and traditions. Now that the first project is supposed to be done on the site of the former Jewish cemetery, and which is quite controversial, and there's a project of Rabbi Schlesinger from London organization that does control of Jewish cemeteries in Europe, and they say that it's not possible to be there because it still has remains of those Jews that were buried in the cemetery. And this project does not plan construction on those sites where there were shootings and graves. And in addition to Ukrainian Museum of Holocaust, I also include Museum of Victor Babi Yar, because, as I've said, it's not only Jews who were killed in Babi Yar, but also other groups of people, including POW. About 20,000 also sailors of the Dnieper fleet, also mental hospital patients, Ukrainian nationalists in 1942, some priests as well. Today, the territory of Babi Yar, which is not looked after, has about 30 monuments which have no concept, not literally, no sensible concept. They should be removed, those projects that are going to be done. Well, basically, I must say that it's time to come to an end. And my speech would like to end this, and hopefully in 5-7 years in Babi Yar, we will have both memorial museum, which lives to the expectations of not only Ukrainian Jews, but Jews of across the world. Thank you.
Have no time for questions. We have to wrap up. Again, I would like to thank you, the organizers, Boris Loshkin. He always comes by the end of the session, so thank you. Thank you, the organizers, and Leshana Ba Kyiv.
There may be no time for questions, but there's time, ample time for answers. And those answers will be provided by you, and you, and you, and by everyone who feels that they have to provide answers with their work, with their lives, with remembering those who are dead, and with providing more life for those who are being born. Boris Loshkin does not come at the end of the session. He's always here as some other organizers or people who are taking part or have taken part in the work of the Ukrainian Jewish Confederation. And I am honored to offer the floor for the closing remarks to the honorary president of the Ukrainian Jewish Confederation, Boris Fuchsman. Please.
Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, dear guests. We're very glad that we hold this event on a very high level with a very active participation. So we had a lot of disputes, panels were very successful, and we do hope that for future, this event would be annually, and we will be improving this event. So we do have some improvement, and we will expand this also. And I do hope to see you next year. I do hope to see you next year for our second Jewish Confederation of Ukraine Forum of Ukraine. And we do hope that you felt quite comfortable this few days here, and that accommodation was okay, and the service was okay, and we will be very happy to get the feedbacks from you. We would be happy to get via email, or maybe it would be great to have that kind of articles in the mass media. So we also would invite you to become the active participants for the process of preparation of our second forum. So all the ideas would be accepted gladly for improvement of our work. So thank you so much, and see you next year.
Of being a moderator comes to an end. Maybe I have my own words to say. Of course, I have my own thoughts. But after people who have spoken in the last panel and after Mr. Fuchsman, I think that I'll reserve my own opening and closing remarks for the next year. I hope that I will be called upon to serve here in some capacity. Anyway, to be on the technological side, you will go from here with impressions. You will go from here with some literature that you were able to take, but please, please, don't take the headsets for simultaneous translation. There's a person there who will be able to receive them from you. And let's again give a big round of applause for all those who were taking part in devising and organizing this conference. And now what is termed in the program as snacks and coffee, but maybe it's more of a networking thing. Thank you very much.